Alright, Ecclesiastes 7. We're going to go with 3 sections because that's what we usually do. So 29 verses in this chapter. In section 1 through 14, life and the purpose of wisdom. Going to read through it, then we're going to unpack it as much as we can. Any questions, as you guys already know, put your hand up and we'll try and answer it as best as you can. First thing I want you to think about, who wrote Proverbs? Solomon. This chapter, reading this whole chapter, makes me think like, oh man, he's in his Proverbs writing mode again, because it's like little snippets of like, oh, that's gold, oh, that's terrible. And there's this roller coaster of little things where you can go, that's really good advice, kind of the same style as a proverb. There's a lot of wisdom just in these opening 14 verses. Jokingly, we say Ecclesiastes is such a joyful book. It makes you smile every time you read it. We don't start off on a strong foot. Okay? A good name is better than a precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Okay, this is a good way to start. But let's break this down, okay? Because at the end of the previous chapter, we can read that Solomon, he's disconnected, he's discouraged, there's something going on that makes him say, I am not feeling joyful and happy right now. Instead, I'm looking for like the meaning of life without God. There is no meaning of life without God. It is all vanity. So we kind of start this again. He's thinking about the meaninglessness of life under the sun, life without eternity, and life without accountability. The thing about being a Christian is you're accountable to Jesus. You're accountable to the people around you. You're held accountable because actually you're saying, my standard is this now. If you don't have that standard, who can hold you accountable? Think about that as we go through these things. Think about the wisdom that's being said here, but think about the impact it has on the person living without God, without hope, without accountability, without eternity. It's a sad place to be. So we can hear this same kind of discouraged tone that we've had throughout the whole book so far, through this opening verse as well. But he ties two really strange statements together. The first one is, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. If you have a bad reputation and have all the riches in the world, you'd just be a rich bad guy. No one would trust you. No one would go to you. Saying it's better to have a good reputation, a good name, a person who's trustworthy, rather than having your, the hall full of gold and you can Scrooge McDuck it the whole time, right? That's the difference here. Job 29:6, Proverbs 21:20, and then Matthew 26:7. Okay, check those three out. It's just basically saying if you have these oils, you are rich. You have, it's a different way of life. The oil or an abundance of oil was a sign of wealth, okay? So he ties this statement with this precious oil, this good name, with the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. That can be pretty tough because he's coming from a discouraged tone. The way he's teaching is sadness, is meaningless, his life is terrible, nothing's good to look forward to anymore, okay? So the feeling that death was better than life, Scott touched on this last week really well. That's just where Solomon was right now. That's why he's saying it. You could be thinking you're going to have the best life ever, but you're just going to die. There's no point. What's the point in this world? And it's this repetition that keeps happening, and you go, oh boy, you're a Debbie Downer today, huh? But in Philippians 1:23, it says this, for I am in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. You are torn between this world and to be with Christ. You're torn to being like, God wants me here for whatever reason. I really want to be with Jesus. That's what we should be thinking about as Christians. We should be thinking about what is next instead of what is now. Whereas the world is thinking about what is now, what about my paycheck? What about my reputation right now, right? We shouldn't be worrying about that. God will take care of us. The difference here is what I'm trying to say is the person without hope, the person without accountability, the person without eternity in mind, meaninglessness, right? The day of death for the Christian believer, the believer, means that our race is won, that our battle is over, right? That we can go and be made new as the Bible promises. What a day, what an incredible thing. That's really, really encouraging. But we also have this place here where we must stay content and actually rejoice in the opportunities that God's asked us to be in now. You see, we can look at the world and say, I don't want to be here anymore, I just want to be with Jesus. That is correct. You should want to cling to Jesus, to be with Jesus. However, God's got you here for a reason. God's got you here for a purpose. It might not be clear right now, but you're here for a reason. And I think that's the big part here. God's given us a role and a placement and a situation that we're going to be living out in our lives for a reason. It might not be clear yet. Pray into that. What's God got you for? You know, what are you doing here? I usually try to drop in Spurgeon as much as I can. He says, life is wrestling, struggling, but death is the end of conflict. It is our rest victory. Our rest victory. Where we can rest in the victory of Jesus Christ. Not in our victory, but in his victory. And I love that because the victory here is not ours. It is Jesus Christ's. The victory is in the truth that heaven is our home if we believe in Jesus Christ. No more struggle, no more wrestling, no more battles. Rest, peace, victory. Okay. Verse 2, it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. I describe that as nowadays. Like a funeral home, maybe, something like that. Where are people usually mourning? Not like mourning in the daytime. Mourning sadness, mourning loss, mourning. That's what they're saying here, okay? Saying better to go to the house of loss, of mourning, of sadness, than to go to the house of feasting. One, you're emptying out. You're getting your emotions out there. You're able to, oh, I'm so sad. The other is you're filling up. It's literally a different situation here. One, you're being filled up. The other one, you're emptying out. And which one is the best place? They're saying actually to empty out, to share those emotions is a big deal. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I get super emotional, Rachel will just tell me, she'll be like, just cry. And I'm like, I don't cry, I'm a man. I sweat through my eyes instead, okay? but it's that funny thing, like we put this real strong persona on it, like we can't cry. But actually sometimes you just need to get it out. There's no meaning to the world. Everything's terrible. There's no point. Get it out, Solomon. Let it out. Let it out of your heart. Don't cling on to those emotions too tightly. And maybe it means a little bit more. But I just think that's just a simple way to take this. Don't go and feed your emotions with food and other desires. Instead, go to that place and let it out. Psalm 90, verse 12, 90 verse 12, to teach us to number our days. Number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. So there's this hope from Solomon that we should be finding meaning of life living under the sun. Now we actually realize that there's hope, but it's only hope in the truth. The truth is, we live and we will die, but where do you go after? We need to cling to that truth, okay? And instead, we should be looking for godly wisdom, not just worldly wisdom. Verse 3, sorrow. Sorrow is better than laughter. Oh, this is a bit weird now. Let your emotions out, get it all out, but sadness is better than joy. Whatever you want to say there, you know? Mm-hmm. For the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better. It's a cheerful verse. Sorrow is better than laughter. But this isn't what we want to accept in this world. But this is the direction that Solomon's kind of pushing it, right? Under the sun, sorrow is better than laughter. It kind of goes hand in hand with that previous verse as well, okay? And then we can read in verse 4 as well, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. These three verses kind of all connect together. The house of mourning, the house of mirth, okay? And we can read there is more wisdom in the house of mourning than in the house of mirth. The heart of the fools is in the house of no lasting value, instead of the house of mourning with the hearts of the wise. And we can see that. One is willing to cover up what they're feeling, how they're doing, and cover their emotions and hide their emotions. The other one is going to the house of mourning, where you literally get all your emotions out. What could that be telling us as Christians? What does that tell you about emotion as a Christian, Joshua? What do you think?
Not to hold on to it, but let it out.
Yeah. Why?
Why? Because it's good to not hold on to something, but give it out. I think Solomon is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
As he wrote all of this, he's letting all of it out.
I feel like it's a personal testimony about what he's doing right now, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key part. Solomon knew God.
Yeah.
Did he know Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
He did?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know Jesus?
God and Jesus.
Right, but God the Father, right? Did you know Jesus as the Son?
Oh, no.
Okay, because he's not around yet, right? So really, what he's doing right now is he's saying you can come to the Father with all your emotions. You can come to the Father with all your cares and all your heart's desires and empty them onto him. That allows you to know that you can be vulnerable, that you can give to God, that he will not reject that. As much as a macho kind of image that we like to put across, God loves it when we're vulnerable and emotional with him, because it shows him the true state of our hearts. The whole of the book of Psalms, I love it because it's like David 1 second is happy, then he's sad, then he's angry, but then he's like really, really crying out his eyes because he shouted at God, and there's this roller coaster of emotions. But David doesn't hold back in shouting and crying out to God in certain ways because he knows God can handle it. He can handle your emotions. What's up?
And I just wanted to say, you don't have to be like scared to let out your emotions, because like Jesus even wept.
100%.
He died.
Yeah. He let it all out. Yeah. And that wasn't like a soft crying, was it? That was a kind of situation. So I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. Let it out. Let out those emotions. Good point. Nice. Okay, verse 5. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. I have this underlined in my Bible, by the way. Because it can be really easy sometimes just to go along with the foolish people. They're all having fun, playing around, listening to songs, doing all that stuff. It can be really easy to be led into that trap. Don't do it. Don't do it. This is a continuation of Solomon's previous thoughts again. You can find wisdom in hard times, in adversity and suffering rather than comfort. And I think the thing about this is we can fall into the ways of the world, which is foolish, or we can cling to what God has for us. And we might think that's backwards because it's not fun. It's not appetizing. It's not attractive. But actually, it's what God has for you. Again, if you haven't found out what that is yet, get praying for it, because that's a really key thing to think about. Proverbs 13:1 says, a wise son has his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. A scoffer does not listen to rebuke. What's rebuke?
Correction.
Correction. So a person basically not listening to correction is someone who's trying to avoid and just live the same lifestyle that they've always lived. Someone who pushes away correction, someone who pushes away advice. And instead, that's what he's saying here, is like, don't be that person. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of the fools. The song of the fools is just going to pull you further away. But the rebuke of the wise is going to try and straighten out that path a little bit more. There's a reason why we go to different people in church. I go to Elder Don for a lot of wisdom because he's lived longer than I have. He's in a successful marriage. He's successfully raised children to follow Jesus, and he's still serving the Lord. I'm like, why wouldn't I talk to a wise person and get that rebuke, that correction when needed? Instead of going, I can handle it on my own. I'm the wisest guy in the world. It's just not true. So find the people, is key. Find the people who can speak into your life. When they have correction for you, accept it. Don't reject it. Don't reject it. Because actually that can be really tough. Find the people who you allow to speak to you. And then accept the advice they have for you, okay? Make sure they're following Jesus. Got a couple of references for you here in wisdom literature, praising the person who accepts the rebuke offered. It's praising them for saying, good job for listening to people's correction, good job, and not staying comfortable, okay? So Proverbs 17:10 and Proverbs 27:5, okay? Okay, verse 6. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. The people, when they used thorns for fire, it didn't last long, right? When they're trying to create fires. And they used thorns, and they got ripped up on their arms. And then they used those and whipped people in their backs with those thorns. So, and then they burnt up the thorns afterwards. But the thorns did not last long in the fire. Thorns burn quickly. They are not good fuel for fire. They're not good for heat. They're not good for fire in general. They all make a lot of noise because of the liquid and the air inside of them. That's the popping and the crackling, right? But then they're gone. So this is a comparison here to the laughter of fools. It's a great noise. It's fun to watch. It may happen and then be gone. It'll be done. But it's done in a moment and then it's forgotten. Whereas the advice, the rebuke from the wise person lingers because actually it's good for you and it affects your heart. One's good for the ears and for the brain of like entertainment. The other's good for the heart. Accept the thing that's good for your heart. Okay? Verse 7. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Okay, oppression and injustice, we know, is a troubling topic throughout the whole book of Ecclesiastes. This whole proverb type saying here, it tells me, like, oppression itself, you can handle those one-offs. But constant oppression will drive you mad. It will drive you to that point of not knowing what to do. And notice that's what kind of the way the world is now. That constant ridiculing, that constant berating of certain things, even when it doesn't make sense. Verse 8, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. You can kind of, like I said, these are like proverbs throughout these last ones. They're kind of tricky to kind of dissect individually, but a lot of these things talk about the same kind of theme. Last two verses have talked about kind of patience in this. Solomon takes his time here to warn us against impatience. Impatience and a pattern of impatience leading to anger. Because living under the sun easily allows us to forget our morals, forget our standards, forget what we're standing on, the foundation that we're standing on, and we turn to impatience and anger instead. The key thing that this comes to mind for me, we just had the election. Christians decided, some Christians, not all Christians, praise God, but some Christians decided, I'm just going to lose that Christian standing for a second and just start telling everyone else, you're wrong for what you think. You're wrong for what you believe. You're wrong for who you follow. You're wrong for this. You're wrong for that. Whatever way you are, whatever way you voted there, we still have a standing as Christians to love our neighbors as ourselves, to look after the people who are lost, to try to lead them to Christ. And I think what happens is that's a very recent example to use. But as we're thinking about this, as we're thinking our spirits need to be patient, that means patient with people as well. Patient with yourself whilst you're going over these situations, when you're having those emotional moments, being patient with yourself to get through these things, not trying to rush it, but also patient with other people too. It can be really easy sometimes when you meet someone new and you go, I just want to talk to you about Jesus, let's go. And I have these conversations with people all the time. They're like, why don't you just talk to them about Jesus and they'll get saved? Because it's not always that way. Because sometimes you've got to do the long approach. That I've got to be a friend to you, that I've got to show consistency to you, that I've got to show up, that you can trust me over time, and then eventually we'll get there. And that requires what? Consistency, love, and patience. Patience. It doesn't happen overnight. So we can apply this little verse here, verse 8, to a lot of things in the Christian faith. Patience is key to the Christian. We're not jumping in fast, 2 feet into the deep end and going, swim, swim, swim. We're saying, I'm going to ease you from the shallow to the deep and see what happens. But I'm there with you. Patience throughout all these things. Okay. Verse 9, do not be hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. So do not act out in the spirit, especially in anger. Anger to me is one of those emotions. You could be frustrated. It's not going to affect too many people. You could be happy. That will affect a lot of people. A smile affects people because usually they see you smiling and they go, oh, no, I want to smile too. That's kind of just what happens. They always say that a smile is infectious. Anger is also infectious. If you're angry, it's very easy to pass your anger onto someone else. Right? People kind of push away other stuff. They can push away kind of smaller things. But it seems like happiness and anger are the two on the different side of the scale here that can be affecting other people too. So anger truly affects all those involved. The person who's angry, the person they are angry to, right? And those people before and after the situation. If I'm angry at work and I yell at someone, hey, Gerald, you didn't bring me my coffee, meh, meh, meh. Yell, 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 shout, shout, shout. Then I get home and I go, oh, you know what, Rachel, I'm just so angry because work. And then Rachel's feeling my anger. And then it feeds into my family life. Then it feeds into my kids. Then it feeds into the whole day. Anger is very easy to be passed along to people. And that's why it's really important that we need to say, do not be someone who's quick to be angry. Hold it back for a second. Breathe. Wait for a second. Again, a couple more things from Proverbs. Proverbs tells us that a fool is someone with a quick temper. A fool. Proverbs 14:17. And then it also says, the wise are slow to anger. Proverbs 16:32. What I'm trying to tell you here is Solomon's already written a lot of wisdom about this. And it's funny because he's living through this stuff and you go, dude, read your writings. Read what you've already written. Read what you're writing now and apply it to your life because you'd help a lot. Don't be quick to anger. Be slow to anger. Be wise about these situations. When we go in angry, when we go in hot-headed, that's when we make mistakes. You know? All right, verse 10. Say not thou, what is the cause, for the former days were better than these. For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this. This is kind of a funny one because my grandpa used to always say this, back in the old day, it used to be better than this. You kiddos wouldn't be able to do, need to go on these long rants about how the world was better back when. And that's kind of what it's saying here. Don't look back. What is the cause that the former days were better than these? Remember back then, it was better then because of this. It can be easy to do that, but when we dwell in the past, we romanticize it a little bit. It was so good back then. Why? Because I had a little bit more money in my pocket. Interest wasn't crazy. But actually, we forget about the hardships typically. Hardships are usually the first things that we forget about. Once it's done and gone, we don't really cling to those parts. We forget the issues because they're dealt with. They're done. But what we're saying is wise people. Being wise means you look at the past to learn from it. You don't forget it. You don't repeat the same mistakes that have already been. Look back and then stay there. You have to live in the present with what God's given us now and apply that truth to now. Okay? That's why we say when you look at the truth, look at the Bible and apply this to your life. We're not saying look at the Bible and live back in these days in the Bible. Instead, be here now but apply these same truths. They're still applicable. They're still the truth. The ways of this world may very well have been different back when. Back in the old day, But the beautiful truth for the Christian is God is the same. Yesterday, today, and forever. He's the same. He's still merciful. He's still just as gracious. He's just as kind. He's just as forgiving. He's just as loving. He is the same. So don't focus on the what was. Look to what is. And that is that God is and always has been good. Look at that. Verse 11, wisdom is good with an inheritance, but by it there is profit to them that see the sun. So the best kind of life is found with wisdom and money. Woo! Wisdom and inheritance, baby, right? Inheritance is something you inherit from someone either they've passed on or you've got to an age and you get that thing now. Typically, the firstborn would get like a huge inheritance because they'd be looking after the women of the family and their mum. And then the secondborn would get a little bit more, a little less, and a little less, because there's less responsibility for them. So back in those days, that was the kind of the situation that they'd have. But we're saying it's not just about the money side of it. It's saying wisdom as well. Okay? Wisdom is good with an inheritance. Being wise with that inheritance is good. Not just money, wisdom and money. Thinking about what you're going to spend it on. Thinking about what you're going to do, okay? So wisdom, excellence of knowledge, that's what that means, excellence of knowledge, combined with that inheritance, gives us a greater path and a greater way to not fall into sin, okay? Verse 12, for wisdom is a defense and money is a defense, but the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. Wisdom is more valuable than money. It is. Well, I've got a lot of money. I wish I was wise with it. Some people say that. Or I'm wise, or I have no money. They're saying, actually, wisdom is better than money. However, both of them can't save you from death. Right? Man with the most money in the world can purchase a personal army of security guards, have a lockdown vault house, be kept completely safe, have the best medicines in the whole world so they can live the longest life they ever could. But eventually, what will happen? They die. The wisest man in the world could spend his whole life asking the question, why? But eventually, it would lead to death. Both of them don't save you. The difference is what the truth is that you're accepting that. Is money all that you're aiming for, or is it something more? Is knowledge and power through that, in fact, the knowledge, is that what you're aiming for, or is there something more? There needs to be something more. Verse 13, consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which he may have made crooked. I've got this underlined as well because I like this verse. If God made something, we can't change that. We don't have the power. If God made it crooked, We can't straighten it out. If he made it straight, we can't make it crooked. We just can't. Because he's the all-powerful, the mighty, right? But that's also the way that God intended it to be. We're powerless to change what God has put into place. But sometimes our arrogance, our human arrogance, can sometimes make us think that what God has done is wrong because we don't think it looks good. We don't think it lines up well enough. So when we consider the Word of God, we must consider who made the world, who did it. So with the mindset of God is the creator, God is the mighty, the powerful, the Father, who did a perfect work according to his plan instead of ours. Yeah, but it didn't work out the way I wanted. It doesn't matter. You try and straighten out that path. The way it is meant to be is the way it's meant to be. Yeah, but life would have been so easy if I could just, that's not the way it's meant to be. So when we look back, we can say, actually, it was so hard when. Why didn't God just help me? Because God's plan had us going through that situation at that time. And struggle sometimes can be really tough. It can be really tough to look back and say, that time we struggled through, financially it was tough, medically it was tough, family-wise it was tough, whatever it was tough. But God had you go through that season, that time for a reason. Find out what it was for. Look to what God could have for you instead. Verse 14, in the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider, God also have set the one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. You ever heard the saying, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. There you go. Be joyful in the days of prosperity. So when you get given prosperity, be joyful. And in adversity, consider what's going on. Think about it. In both, we must look to God. We simply cannot do this on our own. We can't live this life on our own. In Job 2:10, there's similar look to the works of God. But in this context, Job is rebuking his wife in this situation, okay? He's kind of telling her, hey, this is the way it's meant to be. This is the way God's allowed it. But God's timing is perfect. God's handiwork is perfect and unchanging. We are not part of the decision-making process. That's down to God. And that can frustrate people. It frustrates me at times. But Solomon here drifts into that despair, considering what God is doing, because we know nothing about it. We are not part of that decision-making process. Section 2, we need to fly through this. 15 through 25, okay? But verse 15, main thing we hear about in this world is just how the wicked person wins in life. You know, all the movies start off with the bad guy always winning, the good guy getting beaten and walking away and having to improve himself to come back to win, right? It's a common thing. It's a common theme. So Solomon here is just repeating the disgust of the realization that this is just what happens sometimes. The good guy loses, the bad guy wins, and boy, it's a kick in the face when it happens. Verse 16 and 17, basically he just says, do not be overly righteous. Do not be overly wise. Do not be overly wicked. Do not be foolish, okay? There is a balance. Again, we mentioned this before, a balance that we're called to live in this world. Solomon is recommending the way of living. Not too much of this, not too much of that. Don't be this way. Because without God, it's not truly great. It could be a good way of living, like it's a mediocre way of living. 9 to 5, working, eating, sleeping, working, eating, sleeping. Oh, it's a good life. The guy worked a lot. But actually, without God in the center, we lose. We lose out on glory, on His love, on heaven. So we should be living with God in the center, with the fear of God as a key drive to why we live the way that we live. Remember, that's a reverent fear. That's not a scared fear. That's a, wow, you're so mighty and I am so not kind of fear. Verse 19 tells us about a wise man living in this world, living under the sun, will still see and appreciate the impact and value of wisdom, which equals more than what 10 mighty men or 10 rulers in the city have. That's kind of crazy, right? So true wisdom is more important than a position of status or riches. So seek that true wisdom. What is that true wisdom? That's godly wisdom, not worldly wisdom, okay? True wisdom is that we are sinful, that this world is a sinful place. This understanding is truly godly wisdom, the understanding that we do not deserve all that we have. But by God's grace, the sin in our heart, in our lives, has been dealt with on the cross. And seek the truth. Okay? Verse 21 and 22 talks about how we receive people's words. Okay? We can take people's words to heart. Everything that people say, we can cling to it. Or we can choose to move on. What do you guys do? Throughout your day, someone walks past and you go, huh, cool hairstyle, Perez. How did that make you feel?
Awesome.
Awesome! You're like, yes, best day ever. Then you walk past another guy and he goes, huh, lame hairstyle, bro.
Oh, heartbroken.
Heartbroken, right? How we take those words. Do you move on from it or do you dwell on it? Well, verse 21 and 22 basically tell us, as humans, we cling to these words and take them too seriously. Don't take the words of others so seriously, guys, because words are fleeting. They do not have strength, really, but we give them the strength. We give them the power that they have because we think about them too much. We say things, we have things said to us. How you receive these things is key. But also, we should not hold people to the words that they say. Well, this guy called me a loser once. I never want to be friends with him ever again. Don't wipe him off like that, right? When things are said in emotion, when things are said in the moment, people get hurt. And it can be really easy to then be like, push you out, shut you out, don't want to talk to you ever again because you hurt me, I'm done with you. Yeah. Verse 23, Solomon's advice here, all that this have I approved by wisdom, I said I will be wise, but it was far from me. It's far from me. Solomon's advice, this understanding that not all wisdom is godly wisdom. There's worldly wisdom, wisdom under the sun. And in fact, we can be influenced by that worldly culture, by that worldly understanding, and by that worldly wisdom every single day. It's in our face. Social media, on Instagram, I think on Twitter, on Facebook, and on TikTok, I think there's literally a guy called Earthly Proverbs. And he has like these two taglines. Yeah, if you do this, you'll get this, bro. Ha! And that's basically what he says. And it's a little tagline. But loads of people look at it. Loads of people follow it. Loads of people absorb that worldly wisdom instead of going to the truth. If it's in our hand, it's really easy to access. I say this before, and I've said this many times, and I'll keep saying it, hopefully. What you put in is what you get out. What you put into your head, what you put into your heart, is what comes out. If you're letting the world in, don't expect to change. Expect to be the same as everyone else, but Jesus isn't calling us to do that. Jesus is calling us to be different. Okay? We all fail, though. We all fail in seeking wisdom. We can't just find it because we want it. You know, it's tough to find sometimes, but true wisdom is from God alone. How do you find that? How do you receive it? Right? Put your Bible right in front of you. That's a good place to start. Verse 24 is a weird verse. Weird verse, okay? That which is far off and exceeding deep, who can find it out? What's far off and deep? I don't know. Sounds like something's buried under the ocean or under the sea or under the ground and you just can't find it, right? It's like a treasure type thing. Solomon is asking this question in regards to wisdom, okay? He's asking it, but it's far away from the world because the world rejects it. It pushes it away. Pushes away the truth. It's so deep because it's buried under all the worldly understanding that's put above it. As truth, for what really it's false truth, the worldly truth. So who can truly find it if it's hidden? The only answer to this is the person that pursues God and truly accepts the truth. Christian should be the one to find that. Verse 25, it says, I applied mine heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things and to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. So Solomon applied to know. He applied himself to learn, to search, to seek out, to understand wisdom, to understand the reason of things, the wickedness of folly, the foolishness, the madness that comes with all this stuff. But again, this pursuit of wisdom does not mean Solomon's life will be any more meaningful. Because living under the sun with the pursuit of worldly wisdom leads to folly, a lack of eternity. Right? Section 3. No wisdom, just sin. Verses 26 through 29. 26. In this pursuit, in this unsatisfying search for wisdom, Solomon understands that women can be a trap. Okay? It's important to not let this happen, to not be snared, to be not caught in the net, to not be hurt. What type of trap are we talking about here, though? The distraction, right? The pull away. But specifically, we can look at something in a second about Solomon 1 Kings 11:4 tells us about Solomon and his old wives turning away to different gods, and his heart no longer being loyal to the Lord. Solomon had in fact been caught up in these traps that he's talking about. This honesty that Solomon is declaring here is fascinating, absolutely fascinating, that he's describing himself as being trapped. He's describing himself, and maybe this, commentators say that this is him declaring he's choosing God instead of the trap now. He's changing his path, he's changing his ways. And who knows if that's true or not? I kind of hope it is, because we're trying to learn from him and his ways right now, right? And if he's getting trapped, what a way to be honest about it, to acknowledge the trap, and then to say, actually, the only way out of this is to declare God the answer. Verse 28, in Solomon's time, it says he could find a rare wise man, 1 in 1,000, but not a wise woman. That's awkward. But actually what he's saying here is not just saying about the population of women, okay? He's not just saying that. He's saying about the group of people that he surrounds himself with. Okay, how many wives did Solomon have? A ton.
700 total, I think.
Yeah, it was a lot over his lifetime. A lot over his lifetime. So out of those hundreds of women, he's saying, were they attracted to me because of wisdom or knowledge or because of money or because of my position? He was king, remember? It would have been very easy for him to find women who were attracted to him or wanted to be his wife. Doesn't mean they were wise. Doesn't mean they were good. It's funny to think that this is the same Solomon who wrote Proverbs 31, right? About the one good wife. The one good wife, you know? And yet he's talking about his unwise many wives. We sometimes think we know the best, yet we still get led astray. What it tells you is the person who's still pursuing Jesus, pursuing God back then, right, still can be taken out. Still can be taken off the path. Your pastors, your deacons, your elders, the people in leadership at your church, you should 100% be praying for them so that they don't be led into this trap as well. Because even the mighty fall. Even the most perfect person gets tempted. Jesus didn't take temptation, remember, but he got tempted by Satan in the desert, right, in the wilderness. Temptation's everywhere. Okay, final verse, verse 29. We have made it. Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. Do you know mankind was created without sin? Right? No sin. It's good news. In the garden, it was all good, but since the time of Adam, there's been many schemes, rebellion, or inventions against God, choosing these other things instead of God. That's what it says here. They have sought out many inventions. What's an invention?
I said schemes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've sought out schemes.
So they sought out many inventions. That's why I got schemes and rebellion. That rebellious heart. That's other thinking. Okay, I can do things better. Usually inventions nowadays are like, oh, your standard doorknob. Look at that. And you go, well, I'll invent a doorknob that has a lock inside it. So it will lock. And you go, oh, that's an amazing invention. That's incredible. You create something that's going to better the thing before. And then someone goes and goes, well, my one's going to have a thumb lock on it, so it would only let you in if you've got a certain thumb. And you go, oh, that's amazing. And they invent, and to nowadays, think about computers. Computers, the oldest computer was the size of this room, on a tiny little screen, but the size of this room. And now we have laptops that are far more powerful than what they could ever dream of. Because inventions are things that kind of improve stuff. When people talk about inventions here, it's schemes, but it's also that thing of saying, I can improve on what God's done. I can improve on who God is. I can improve because I actually know more. I'm actually better. That's just not the truth. So ever since the garden, since the time of Adam, there's been many schemes, there's been many rebellions, there's been many false gods, there's been many idols, there's been many things that have been placed in between mankind, right, and God. But God did in fact make man upright. So when we think about those schemes, those inventions, those rebellions, we're actually talking about the rebellious heart, the rebellious faith that we have, the rebellious obedience that we have to other things apart from God. And that's the whole point, pulling us away, pulling us further away from what God's got for us. So my question then is, are you living an upright life? Are you following God? Are you choosing Him? Because you have a choice. 3 final thoughts here. First one, are you focused on the things that have happened instead of what is in front of you? Are you looking back instead of looking forward or looking to the right now? Understand that God is consistently good. He is good, was good, and always will be good. Okay? And he has you in whatever place you're in right now for a great reason. For a great reason. You guys heading back to Pakistan. I believe he's got you going back to Pakistan for a really good reason. I don't know what it is. That's up to God. Liana, you've been placed in Spokane for how long now?
Like 6 months.
And you leave soon, right? February? It's going to be sad. I'm going to be sad about that. But you've been here for a really good reason. And actually, we've loved having you here. And one of the reasons why you've been here is you've been an encouragement to me. I believe that wholeheartedly of like, your family have encouraged me in the youth ministry so much. So God's used you guys for being here. God's got a reason for all of that. That's what I'm trying to say here. We could go for every single person in the room, and we can say, God's got you here for this thing here. I know how it's affected me, but God's got it for an even greater purpose. He's got you here for a reason. He's got you going to places for a reason. What is it? What is that reason? 2, seek wisdom. What type of wisdom, Joshua? Godly wisdom for 10 points. Ding, ding, ding. Good job. Turn away from the wisdom of the world. Turn away from it. Open your Bibles. Look at what the truth says. Then look to godly wisdom. How do you apply this to your life? How do you live out what God has for you? Look to God. Seek his wisdom. Follow his path for you, okay? What he's made cannot be undone, right? That path may be crooked, but it's for a reason. Keep following God. Look to godly wisdom. Final one here. Are you living an upright life? How are you living? Are you living with God in the center, or is he just slightly to the side in your life? Is his word, the Bible, the foundation of all you're doing? Not really a fault. How we live, faithfulness, obedience, the pursuit of godly wisdom. Are you living an upright life in all these things? Your testimony in doing this speaks a lot. Your testimony to other people when they see you, when they talk to you, when they ask you questions, it tells them more about who you follow rather than who you are. You can turn around and say, I read the Bible, I pray, all these things. But you're a Christian. Do you show it by the way you live as well? Do you show it by the way you're acting? Are you living upright? Ecclesiastes is tough. But I've mentioned it so many times. There's a lot of hope in these verses. There's a lot of hope in these chapters. God is in here and he's promising hope and life and love and forgiveness. You need to find it. So hopefully you found something there. Ecclesiastes chapter 7.